Hi friends, welcome back to my quilt room. And if you're new here, I'm so glad you found my channel. This video is coming out the day after Thanksgiving, so I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday. For me, the first day after Thanksgiving is the start of my Christmas season. I never decorate until Thanksgiving is over. So today is the first official day that I start decorating and get ready for Christmas. So today I thought, what better block to do than some Christmas trees? So I have 3 different trees for you today. First is this one. We're going to do that out of a layer cake. The next one is this cute little wonky tree that we're going to make out of fat quarters. And then there is this style, which we're going to make out of a jelly roll. So 3 different pre-cuts today. So I'm going to show you how to make all those blocks, how to put it into a Quilt As You Go block, and how I quilted it. So I hope you'll stay with me and let's get started. Okay, so the first block we're going to do is this Christmas block, and we're going to use a layer cake for this. And what I'm using is, it's called Andover from Good Things, and I believe I got this from Missouri Star Quilt. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this out, and I'm just going to pick 2 contrasting fabrics. And let's do a green one this time. And all these have kind of like a gold pattern to it. And then I'm going to pick this one. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to stack these up. And the first thing I'm going to do is make my first cut. And I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to cut about 2 inches off the bottom. So that's going to be our trunk. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold this, crease it a little just so I know where my halfway mark is, and then cut that in half. We'll put them aside. Now what we're going to do is we are going to take our block and we're going to make our tree part. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in. Now you don't want to start way out here because you need enough here to not cut off your points and to make sure that you have enough to square it up at the end. So I'm going to move in about, I'm going to say maybe 1 3/4 inches. And first let me make my halfway point. I'm going to go down a little further. Okay. So I'm going to move in about 1 3/4 maybe. And honestly, it could be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be any exact amount. So I'm going to say right about there. And I'm going to cut straight up. Okay, so we're going to move that over. Now our second one, what we're going to do is I'm going to come in around the same amount. But you don't want to go all the way to the top because when we square this up and also when we sew it, you're going to lose your point there. So you want to bring it down, I would say at least 1 inch. So I'm going to say right about there. So that's about 1.5 inches in. And this is about 1 inch down. So I'm going to cut right up there. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our middle section, take that top one and put it on the bottom. So now this is going to be our tree block. And I'm going to do the same thing with my trunk. because our trunk is going to be the same as our tree. Now you'll also need your trunk of the tree. So what I did was I just got some brown fabric and I cut a 2-inch strip out of it. And this is my brown trunk and I just cut 2 inches. So I'm going to put that aside. So now what we want to do is we want to put this back together. So now the way you want to put this together is you want to take the last one you cut, which is this one, and then match it up with your tree. So what I'm going to do is take this one and this one, and we're going to lay that, and it should match pretty much end to end, and it does. So I'm just going to take that and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch straight down, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now there's half of our side, and I'm just going to iron that down. Put these over here. And you can iron whichever direction you want for your seam allowance. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to be really nesting any seams in this. So we're just going to do it that way. So mine just went that way. Let's put this one aside. And now we're going to take our next side. Now, as you notice, we have a little extra on the side here. So I'm just going to trim that up so it's not in my way when I sew the other one. And I'm just going to follow the block all the way up. So now what we want to do is we want to take this side, flip that over, and we're going to line that up. And I usually just line up the bottom from the bottom and then all the way up. And then I'm going to sew 1/4 inch all the way down. Okay, so now there's our block, and I'm just going to iron this. Again, it doesn't matter which way you put your seam. Now you could trim that off at the top and the bottom if you want, which I'm going to do the bottom because we're going to put our trunk on next. So I'm just going to trim this up. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to put our trunk on. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our trunk pieces and take our little trunk here, and we're going to sew that 1/4 inch and then sew this side 1/4 inch. So I'm going to do that and I'll be right back. Okay, and there is our trunk block. So now I'm just going to iron this real quick. Again, I'm just going to iron it whichever way my seams want to go. Now what we're going to do is I'm just going to find the center of this and the center of my block. And try to match them up. And then I'm going to sew 1/4 inch all the way down and our block will be done. So I'll be right back. Okay, so there is our block. I'm just going to iron that seam down. Okay, so for our next block, we're going to do this wonky tree here. And I'm using a fat quarter bundle that I did pick up from Amazon, and doesn't have a name to it. I think it says it's from Craft Tito. Not sure what company that is, but I thought I would try it. And the fabric is actually pretty good. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some fat quarters, and what you want is at least 2 for your block, and then you want a background and then a trunk. So what I did was I just did a plain white background for mine, and then I used my fat quarters for the actual tree, and then I didn't really have any more brown for the trunk, So I just did this little gray polka dot. I thought that was really cute. So put that aside. Let's take our fat quarters and let's just grab a couple. And I'm going to grab some fabrics that aren't directional. So we could do this one, maybe this one. I'm gonna do like 4 of them at a time. Do the green. I think it is directional. So let's do another one of these. So we'll put them aside. So I'm just gonna iron these real quick and I'll be right back. Okay, so now for this block, I have all my fat quarters ironed and I did square it up. So I have 4 layers right here. Now what we also need is our trunk pieces, which is a 2-inch by the width of fabric. And then we need 2 4-inch pieces of background fabric, and that will be the trunk. Then we will also need 4, and that's this, we'll also need our background, which will be 6 inches by the width of fabric. So those are all the pieces we need. Now what we want to do first is make our trunk. So basically what we're going to do is lay out 1 4-inch piece, and we're going to sew our trunk piece to that. Then we're going to take our next 4-inch piece and we're going to sew that to that. Okay, so we have that sewn down now. And what I'm going to do is just real quick, I'm going to iron my seams on this. So I'm just going to turn it over and put them up and just turn them down. Okay, so now we want to cut that. And I'm going to move this out of the way for now. Now first I'm going to cut my selvages off. I'm going to just line this up with my roller, with my mat there. And then I'm going to trim off these selvages. And I've already trimmed this selvage off. I just need to trim those 2 down. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to cut a couple of these out. And what you want to do is you also want to make these wonky like your tree branches, we'll call them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my ruler on there and I'm going to go in about 1.5 inches on the bottom, and then I'll do 2 on the top. It could be any number that you want. And I'm going to cut that. And now for the next one, what I want to do is I'm going to cut this one straight because we're already on an angle there. So I'm just going to sort of line this up with my ruler. And I'm going to cut about there. And then since we went this way first, I'm going to go this way this time. And I'm going to cut right about there. And I'm just really eyeballing it now. And then again, I'm going to go straight on this one. And I think that's it for now. So we'll do 4. So I'm going to put this aside. And I'm going to bring my fat quarters over. Okay, so let's put these aside. We have our trunks ready. And what we're going to do now is line them back up. we are going to take my long ruler here. And what I'm going to do is I'm now going to cut these sort of the same way I did that. And we're going to go cut these a little wonky now. So I'm just going to line up my ruler again, however much you want. You could have fat ones, you could have skinny ones. Okay, cut that. Again, the next one I'm going to do straight because I already have my angle on there. So let's do this one right there. And now this one, I'm going to go this way. That looks good to me. And we'll do about 6. And you want to do anywhere from like 4 to 6, depending on how tall or how big you want your trees. And this one, yeah, that looks good. Okay, so we'll do that much for now. Oops. Just a thread right there. Okay, now we have all that. So let's just hold this up and move this aside. Now what we want to do is we want to, because these are so long, we're going to cut these in half. And what you could do is just take them and just fold them in half like that. And then this gives you even a different shape because now you have smaller and larger. So let me do that to the rest. Now, if you're wondering why we cut these in half like this, it's because our trunk, when we got done sewing that, the 4 inches on each side and then the 2 inches here, it came out to be, once it was sewn, it came out to be 9 inches. So if a fat quarter is 18 inches, then you just want to cut it in half. Now, if you got less than 18, you want to be mindful of that and just maybe lay this on here and cut where you think it should be. And then you could make a smaller tree with the other one if that's not big enough. So it's pretty versatile and you can get a lot of mileage out of this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start building our tree. So let's get our trunks here. And we're going to first put one of our trunks down. And then we're just going to just pick and choose your whatever you want. So I'm going to do that one there. Pick a skinny one. Okay. Now you could do just 2 fabrics. You could do 3, whichever you wish. So if you wanted all scrappy, you could do as many as you want inside there. Let's pick a fat one. Let's do that one. And then I'm going to do a skinny one. Oh, let's do this one. I think I used that. Okay. Let's try this one. There you go. And don't worry if some are longer than the others. It's not a big deal. We're going to trim this down. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do 5. And let's do this one. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this to the machine and I'm going to sew each one of these to itself. So I'm just going to pick this up like this, take it to the machine, and I'm going to sew each one down. And I'll be right back. Okay, so now I have that all sewn down. There's my seams on the back. And what I wound up doing is I went back and I added another one at the top because I decided I wanted my tree a little taller than it was. And that's the fun of this, is you can just add as many rows as you want, make your tree taller, smaller. You can even make it skinnier, wider, just cut these strips longer and make your trunk piece longer by adding maybe more background or adding your trunk bigger. It's so free that you can just do what you want. So I'm just going to iron this real quick. Iron my seams. Okay, so that's all ironed down. So now what we want to do is we want to cut our tree shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to, first I want to find my center up here. So I'm just going to fold this, crease that a little bit, grab my ruler. And what we want to do is we want to cut from that angle or from that halfway mark straight down to the end of our tree. We're not going to cut our trunk, and I'll show you why when we add our background on. So I'm just going to take this and then bring it down to that corner, and I'm just going to cut that off. And then I'm going to do the same with this, but I'm going to flip this because I cut right-handed, so it's easier. So I'm going to, now, as you see, I'm not even with my block here, but that doesn't matter if I cut a little bit of that off. I just want to make sure that I at least get to the end of that bottom tree trunk, or that bottom tree part. Okay, so that little bit doesn't matter. So there we have our tree. Now, these two pieces you can still use if you wanted to. Just put them together like that, and you can make another little tree. And then you can just make your background bigger to match your other trees. So you kind of like have no waste in this if you wanted to really use them. All right, so now what we're going to do is we have our tree cut. We're going to take our background piece and see which is the right side. Here we go. With right side facing up, I'm going to lay my tree right about the halfway mark, but not to the edge either. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our ruler, follow that line, and we're going to cut. And then that's going to be used for our background. And we're going to flip this and sew that to our background. So I'm going to get my other piece. I'm going to flip this and do the same thing on the other side. But I'm going to go this way because that's an awkward angle to cut. So you just want to estimate around where the halfway mark is here. Again, I'm going to line that up. And I'm going to cut. And that's our other background piece. So let me get this out of the way. Take our tree. And the first thing we're going to do is sew this one to this piece, to this side, with right sides together. And yes, it's going to go off here, but you'll see at the end when we square this up. So now I'm going to sew this 1/4 inch down, and I'll be right back. Okay, so there's our one side sewn down. I'm going to flip this over, and you want to continue all the way down. This will make sense in a little bit. So now I'm just going to iron that. Now I'm going to take my other side, oops, flip that, and just line that up. And I'm just really taking this point right here and lining that up. Okay, and then I'm going to take that to the machine and sew that. Okay, so now we have our second side sewn down. And this is what it's looking like. So I'm just going to press this real quick. Okay, so now what we want to do is, normally you might want to square this up if you were not doing the Quilt As You Go, but I'm not going to square it up right now because I want to sandwich this in my Quilt As You Go sandwich, and I don't want it to be exact in case when we're quilting the top, it might shrink up a little bit. But I'm just going to get rid of some of this. There's little ends up there, just to even that up a little bit. So I'm going to leave that the way it is. And then I'm going to move on to the next tree. And when I come back at the very end, we're going to sandwich all these together. So I'm just going to put this one aside. But that's pretty much our tray right now. So let me get ready for our next tray. Okay, so for our next style block, we have this one. And this I'm using a jelly roll for. It's only 2.5 inches each strip, so you could also do it out of yardage. You're going to just pick 2 fabrics and cut 2.5 inch strips. And then for the bottom, you just need a little piece for the trunk. And I just did a 2 inch, but you could also do smaller if you want a skinnier trunk or wider. Totally up to you. And I'll give you the measurements for these and how to cut it. So first I'm going to grab 2 pieces of my jelly roll. Now I am using a jelly roll I got off of Amazon. It is, again, the same maker I used for my fat quarters. It's Craftito. And the reason I usually buy these is because when I make videos every week, I need fabric a little quick. So ordering off of some websites, it takes a while to get. And I usually need it within a day or 2. So, and my Hobby Lobby, to be honest with you, never really changes. So I feel like I'm buying the same fabrics all the time. And this, believe it or not, if you're using Hobby Lobby fabric or you use Joann's fabric, is honestly the same equivalent. It is soft. In fact, I think it's sometimes softer than what I get at Hobby Lobby. And it's not a bad quality. So that's just an idea if you need fabric quickly. Okay, so we're going to pick 2 fabrics from here. And I'm just going to grab, let's do a green one. I'm going to grab this one. And I think I'll take this one. Okay, so we have our 2 fabrics. I'm going to put these aside. And I'll give you the measurements now that we're going to cut. Make sure my iron's heated up. Okay, so what we want to do is for our tree fabrics, we're going to cut a 4.5, 6.5, 8.5, and 10.5. So first I'm going to take that selvage off. And I'm just going to cut that small piece off. Now for this, you want to open your jelly roll up because you only need one strip of each. So our first cut is going to be 4.5. I'm lining this up with one line on my mat so I know it's straight. And then I'm going to line my ruler up at the 4.5. That's our top. Then we go 6.5. So we're going to increment every 2 inches. Then I need an 8.5. And then a 10.5. And I'm going to iron this crease out really quick because I don't want it to interfere with my cut. And this is going to be a 10.5. Okay, and this is what we have left. So that's our tray. Now we want to do our background fabric. Now this one I'm going to keep folded because we need 2 pieces, one for each side. Okay, so now let me cut that selvage off. Luckily it's a small amount because you're going to use most of this. So now what we want to do is we want to cut a 2 6-inch, 2 5, 2 4, and 2 3 inches. So first we're going to do our 6-inch. Oops, let's go this way. Want to make sure your numbers are in correct position because you don't have much fabric on this one to play with. So that's our 6. Then we want a 5. Then we want a 4. Then we want a 3. And then this piece we're going to open up and we're going to cut right down the middle for our trunk. You should get around a 4.5. But if not, if it's a little less, it doesn't matter because we're adding this 2 inches to it. So you have plenty of room down here. So that utilizes all our fabric for that. So now we want to put this together. So I'm going to bring my 3 pieces here and my background. So what we want to do is we want to take our top piece, take our top background, and what we want to do is we want to sew this like we're sewing our when we're making our binding. You want to take it, you want to flip that like an L, and then you want to sew from corner to corner so that when you flip this up, it'll be like that. So I'm going to grab my ruler. Now it's hard to know where that little point is, right? To pinpoint where you should stop sewing. So what I do is I figure out which direction I want to go in. And then I look for that 45-degree line and I line that up at the top. And the tip of my 45 is going to be at the tip of my top piece of fabric. I'm going to line the 45 up. So now when I draw my line, it should end right here. So I'm going to grab my pen. And then when I fold that back, it should come right to the tip there. So you could, that's one way of doing it. Another way is the way I just did it. Just lay it on there and then fold that to where it meets up top. And then you can finger press. And then fold it back, and then you can sew on that line where I just pressed it. And if you see, it's right where my drawn line is. So that's another way to do it. So I'm going to take that to the machine and I'm going to sew right on that line. But a tip that I have shown you before is to sew right inside that line, inside towards the outside corner. So that when you sew right inside there, it gives you that little extra to make sure that you're meeting up at that top. Hope that makes sense. So let me go sew that and I'll show you. Okay, so as you can see, I just sewed just right inside that line. So that now when I pull this back, it's pretty much a guarantee that I'm going to meet that top and bottom. So I'm just going to sew that pen mark off, take my ruler, line this up at my 1/4 inch on the seam line, and cut that. And then I'm going to press that back. Okay, and there's our one side. So now we're going to take our other side and do the same thing. I'm going to fold that right sides together, lining that up at the top and the side. And now I want to sew this way. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to put it this way. And then I'm going to find that 45 and move it up to the top, making sure I'm lined up at that corner. And then I'm going to draw my line. Okay. So when I fold this back, it should land right there. So again, I'm going to take that to the machine and I'm going to sew right inside this drawn line. And I'll be right back. So again, I just sewed right inside that line. So I'm going to erase that and then take my ruler, line my 1/4 inch up right on my seam line and cut. And then I'm going to iron that back. And there's our first row of our tree. Now I'm going to take our second one, which would be the next length. And then I'm going to take our second border, or background, sorry, our second background. And again, I'm going to do the same thing. Now, this is a directional print. So you want to make sure that you have the right end. Like if I put it this way, that'll be upside down. So I want to make sure and just test it out, that's all, that I have the right way. So again, I'm going to line that up. I'm going to look at the direction I need to sew in, which is this way. Find my 45 and put it right on that edge there. And then I'm going to grab my pen. And then when I take it to the machine, again, I'm going to sew right inside that line so that when I fold it up, I can guarantee that I'm going to have enough room to make those meet. So I'm going to continue to do that with all my tree pieces, and then I'll be right back when I have that done. Okay, so all my tree branches are done, and I'm going to move this up for a little bit. Okay, and there's the tree. Now we want to do our trunk piece. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our pieces we had for the bottom, make sure they're going in the right direction if you have a directional print. And what we're going to do now is to sew these two pieces to this. So when I get that done, I'll be right back. Okay, so here is my bottom piece with my trunk. And what I did was I went back and made my trunk a little larger because I was a little short on my ends here. So I just went back and found some more brown and then just cut this a little wider. So if you find that, you're a little short, you can always add something to it. So I'm just going to iron this down now. And now what we're going to do is we are going to start sewing our rows together. And what you want to do is just sew the first one to the second and so on and so forth. Now, to keep it straight, what you want to do is just fold these in half. And I just make sure that this is lining up with this point. And then I just sort of finger press that. And then I do the same with this one. And then I just match those two together. I sort of creased it there. And then I just sew. So when I get that done, I'll be right back. Okay, so our block is all sewn down. And I love this tree. This is probably one of my favorites. So now what we're going to do is we're not going to trim this up yet, again, because we want to sandwich this and sew it quilted first. So we want to make sure that we have enough room for shifting or shrinking a little when we sew it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my batting and my backings, and I'm going to show you how I quilt all three of these. Okay, so now I have all my tops, my batting, and my backing for each one. Now, what you need to decide is how you're going to sash these together, whether you're going to use sashing or no sashing, because that will determine how you're going to cut your batting and your backing. For no sashing at all, you would cut your batting a ½ inch smaller than your top. And I will link that video below so that you can watch that. If you are sashing, you want to cut your batting and your backing slightly larger because you want to allow for the quilt, when you quilt it, for it to, shrink up a little or shift. So I'm doing sashing on all mine. So I'm cutting my batting and my backing slightly larger than my tops. So now how do I want to quilt these? Well, I'm probably going to do echo quilting on this one and this one. And what that means is I'm going to quilt right outside the block so that it echoes the shape of the block, or my tray, I should say. And then I'm going to do the same for this one. Now for this one, I'm going to do a stitch in the ditch, and I'm going to stitch across each tree branch and then down my trunk. So I'm going to go do that, and then I will come back and show you what we have. Okay, so I have all three blocks sewn down, and this one I did the echo quilting just right outside the tree, and same with the trunk part. And then this one, same thing. And I kept my regular thread because I really like the look of it, how it stands out, the echo quilting. So I kept my normal thread for that. And the same with this one, I just stitched in the ditch across here. I didn't do the echo quilting, although I do think that would look really pretty on this too. So I just did stitch in the ditch for all the tree branches and then right on the side of the trunk. For this block, which I realized I didn't have that in the frame with these, I had two of these instead of this one. What I did was the same thing. I did some echo quilting all the way around the block. So now we want to square these up. So let's take our first one, take our little one here. And there's really no set amount that this should be. What I would do would be to lay your ruler on it and see what you can get. And if I line this up, it looks like, I play around with this, looks like I can get 8 3/4. So I'm going to trim this side down because it looks pretty straight to me. So I'm just going to go all the way to the edge of my block and trim this. And I'm going to flip it and put it on the 8 3/4. Okay. And then I'm going to go to this side. So I'm just going to trim this down to the edge of that. And there we go. So now I have an 8 3/4 block. Now, if I was making all of this type of tree, then that's what I would square it down to. And you could check all your blocks, make sure, you want to go with the shortest one that you have. So that's that one. So now let's take a look at this one. So if I put my ruler, try to make it squared, I'm going to go with 10 3/4. Now, what you want to be conscious of is you don't want to cut your points off. So you want to make sure that you have at least 1/4 inch past your 2 points here. So our block came to 11 wide and 10 3/4 high. And you still have some room here if you want to take 1/4 inch off so that it's 10 3/4 all the way around. That's totally up to you. I'm happy with that. For this block, what you need to decide is, so we have our trunk down here, and that's wonky, right? So you want to decide whether you want your block straight, and then you'll have to cut this straight, or you want your trunk straight and your block wonky. So whichever you decide. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my wonky trunk, and I'm going to first trim this down so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so now my trunk is going to be straight, wonky straight, if that makes sense. And my tree is going to be slanted. So now what I want to do is I want to square this up. And the reason we kept these long was because we want to make sure that we have 1/4 inch past our point here so we don't cut that off when we put our blocks together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I have 1/4 inch past my tree point. I'm going to line my ruler up with my bottom edge because I know that's straight. And I'm going to cut. Okay, so that's one side. And then again, I'm going to line this up with my line, one of my lines on my mat. And then I'm going to make sure I have 1/4 inch past this point, making sure that my ruler is lined up with my straight edge there. And I'm going to cut that. Just make sure I'm over enough. Okay. And then I'm just going to cut my top straight, making sure, again, I have a 1/4 inch past that point. And I'm going to line my ruler up with my 2 edges. Make sure I'm straight there. And there we go. Now this is a little short, squatty one, but you can make it as tall as you want. Again, just by adding to your rows and then until you make it as tall as you want. And then you can also make the trunk bigger if you wanted to. So this is our 3 blocks. And they are all sandwiched in our Quilt As You Go sandwiches. Here's the back of this one. And then this one just has the lines. And then this one. And again, you can make these any size you want. They're all freeform, so that's why we didn't really have any specific squaring up measurements, because you can make these as big as you want, wide as you want. It's totally freeform for these. So I hope you enjoyed this video of all our different Christmas trees. We had 3 different kinds. This one we made out of fat quarters. This one we made out of a layer cake. And this one we made out of jelly rolls. And the possibilities are endless with these trees. First of all, you could make them any size you want. They're totally freeform. You can make them taller, skinnier, wider, shorter. It doesn't really matter. And you can do so many things with these. You can make them obviously into a quilt if you wanted to, but you can make them into a table runner. You can make them a little smaller into a mug rug. You could make it into a hot plate. So many things you can do with these. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you give it a thumbs up and a subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you know when my next video comes out. And until I see you in the next one, happy sewing and sew something happy.